Okay, I think we're recording. Okay, well, hello. I am, my name here says Haley Cotty. I am Jessie, and I'll give you a little more information about me in a little bit, but welcome to Forest Flow for outdoor sequencing. So the purpose of this presentation is with Explore More. We've been working on a couple of different monthly workshops, and this is one of them. And so we're going to be going with outdoor sequencing today. Outdoor sequencing. And this is one of my favorite things. As you can see, there's a couple of pictures here from some of my classes or some of my practice, and I love outdoors. So we're going to go with we'll start with a little intro into what we're talking about more and overview it. Then we'll move into setting some intentions. We'll work with some safety and mindfulness, working with props. That's part I'm really excited to share with you guys. And then we'll move more into the actual sequencing. And we've got a little bit of a meditation script at the end that we'll do as well. And that's something you can also, a practice that you can take with you as well. There are quite a few resources available in this presentation and links to other information. So buckle up. So I am Jessie. I'm a 500 RYT, 200 ERYT, and I'm a YSET provider. So with Yoga Alliance, I'm a continuing education provider. So I fully believe in the transformative power of connecting the mind and the body and the spirit. Yoga, nature, community, all of those things have been super, I don't know, just a part of my life and my journey. And Explore More has been a great way that I've been able to do that and really grow that. I love being able to look back. As it says here, I started with Explore More as a guide in 2020. And I'm really excited to get to share all of this with you guys. And some of you might be guides with Explore More and might not. I used to live in Dallas. I now live in Virginia and am still getting to work with this. So Explore More was actually kind of like my first yoga gig whenever I did graduate with my 200 RYT. And I just love being outdoors. I love nature. I'm an ultra runner, or I have been, whatever. I like to hike. I like to be outdoors. And we'll go into some different examples that I've had of different classes. And I've just been able to do a lot with it in yoga and nature and unity, community. It just all ties in together. So I'm really excited to get to share this because this is kind of my passion and part of my personal practice as well. So why we are here is we're going to learn to kind of adapt your yoga practice or your teaching practice to various outdoor environments. We're going to work on understanding safety considerations and mindful practices in nature that are conducive to being to help with that. We're going to master the art of sequencing for dynamic and restorative flows. And we'll kind of walk through some of these tools that we've created. We've got a couple of downloads and things for you as well. Hopefully this practice and this workshop can help you cultivate a deeper connection with nature and also help with helping you cultivate your students' connection with nature as well. And then this really just outdoor yoga in general itself is such an invaluable resource for personal growth and teaching. Like nature can teach us so much. There's so many lessons there. And I'll save some of that for in future slides. So we are doing this recording separately. So there is not the live Q&A or any of the live interactions with this particular workshop. So look forward to that and others. Again, some of our workshops are pre-recorded and then some are in the moment and live. So if we were together, I would actually ask you to share your name and maybe go ahead and just take a moment, even if you're just watching this, to think about what brought you to this workshop today. And, feel free to pause this for a few minutes, a few seconds, whatever feels right. And just kind of take a second to what brought you to watching this. Maybe you just needed some CEUs. Maybe you really like the outdoors. Maybe you wanted just some ideas to change it up. And whatever the reason, glad you're here. So we'll go ahead and move forward. Again, we just kind of talked about why you're here. We want to move into a little bit of connecting with yourself before we move forward as well. So one of the things that from the Yoga Sutras 4.2 actually, and I don't have the Sanskrit translation, so I do apologize for that. It is in some of the resources. 4.2 is translated as in the Yoga Sutras as coming into being as a transformation that follows the flow of nature. So as we're talking about yoga in nature, how can we not talk about that, right? And so I wanted to bring that in, that the sutras also talk about how outdoor yoga and nature is part of this spirit, mind, and body connection. So it also continues, not continues, but in 2.18 of the Yoga Sutras, there is, it talks about the flow of life. Again, flow of nature, the flow of life, it's all connected, right? But it evolves according to the intrinsic tendencies in nature. We've got Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas. And so movement, which is Rajas, is again like our physical movement, things like that. We've got our balance that's kind of in the middle, and then we've got balanced movement and stillness, and then we've got inertia, which is then Tamas. And all three of those states, right, are also present. And there's so many ways we can kind of go with that, but just basically that the sutras support that nature and outdoors and yoga can be together and are meant to be together. So I'll go ahead and take a moment just to reflect on like your personal goals for this workshop, on what you hope to learn or experience, any takeaways you're looking for. My hope is that you find them. And if not, please do jot this down, send us some information afterward, or a question afterward. All of our contact information is in there, and I would love to be able to chat with you. Again, without the live Q&A, we just don't have that opportunity here. So feel free to reach out in any of the Facebook groups or via our emails that are at the end there. So why do we want to practice outdoors? We've already talked about the sutras support it, from a yoga perspective, where we're doing great if we're doing yoga out in nature. So there are a lot of benefits of practicing mindfulness in nature. I'll get into them a little bit more in a little bit, but there's several different books that if you've read, like The Secret Therapy of Trees, I'm currently reading it. And it just talks about like the electromagnetism and all the different things, even terpenes, and how our body exchanges with different types of trees and the terpene levels that they have present and the types of terpenes that they have. So like between that and then the electromagnet areas, and it's just so interesting because we are meant to be in communion with nature to bring balance to ourselves. And so and there's just all this science and biology and interconnection and exchange that really support that. So we'll go into more of that. And if that's new to you, there's definitely a whole world out there. And maybe that's something that's not new to you if you're already watching this as well. But you want to, whenever we're practicing outdoors, we can let go of distractions and be more present. Again, be here now. And in order to do that, I'll go ahead and throw out kind of our first little tidbit, helpful trick to kind of keep up. I know we say like, okay, the senses, right? And how do we do that? But whenever we're outdoors, that is a beautiful way to be able to come in and do that. So here's kind of just some suggestions on ways that you could be here now, and maybe, practice this wherever you are right now. We will be doing some of this in our guided recorded session as well. So yeah, so with sound, you could listen to the birds singing, the wind rustling, water flowing. Those are great ways, all of the above, right? And kind of zooming in and out as you engage with your participants and with yourself. just finding that. And this exercise could be great just to walk through on your own as well, like just sitting outside. So yeah, listening to the sounds, seeing what all you can hear that are natural sounds, not just cars driving by or anything like that, but really listening to the natural sounds. Smell, notice the scent of the trees, the earth, the flowers, maybe the grass just got mowed, right? Then we've got sight. So observing the colors, the shapes, the textures, um, and really, maybe finding different intricacies like the different blades of grass, right? And seeing if you can kind of count that. Also a great exercise for kids if you need them to be busy for a minute, but obviously it's helpful to help them too. And then touch, feel the ground beneath your feet, the bark of a tree as you pass by, the coolness of the air or the breeze. So many of these things that are outdoors, again, are multisensory. And so it is a multisensory experience. Taste isn't one that we mentioned here. It can, however, certainly be useful. Maybe a drink of water or your Gatorade can be what what you utilize, eating an orange or a snack. But I don't suggest licking dirt, but it's you do you. But yeah, creating a lot of sensory experiences really helps start that process of being able to ground in and start to get those benefits immediately because you're tuning into them. So it's almost like this intentionality that comes from the sensory experience and really grounding in before you begin really moving and doing more of the yoga, what most people think of yoga, the asana, the postures. But we know that this being present and being mindful is part of the yoga as well. And so being able to have people immediately start to get those benefits, even if it's not necessarily what they thought they were going to get. So let's go ahead and move into leave no trace. I will say I have a note for myself not to go on a tangent here. Because with Leave No Trace, we did a whole workshop on that with Leave No Trace and the yamas and the niyamas. So ways that we could incorporate the Leave No Trace and how they apply with yoga ethics and yoga philosophy. And it's a great workshop. Please go. It's been so fun. I've loved everyone that's been able to participate and even send in their reflections if they were doing CEUs. It's been beautiful. So I won't go into everything, but we will do a small overview of Leave No Trace because we can't talk about outdoors and yoga without also tying in these other principles that we have. So we've got plan ahead and prepare. And that's with every yoga class, right? Travel on and camp on durable surfaces. We'll talk a little bit more about surfaces here in a moment. Dispose of waste properly. So that's part of the planning. And at the end, part of this, there's a beautiful little checklist and a nice little reflection sheet where you can build build different workshops or build different classes, and then be able to kind of reflect on them and see how they went, and then troubleshoot and go from there. But on that checklist, there's also a checklist that is like kind of all the different things. We're working on making sure it feels right and not just too repetitive, but yeah, we'll be disposing of waste properly is something you think of kind of at the beginning. It's part of the plan ahead and prepare segment, and how we'll integrate just leave no trace principles here as well. And in your outdoor classes, you want to follow these leave no trace principles as well. So leave what you find. Again, try not to disturb as much as you can. Again, we'll talk about some different things that you can do with some different natural props in a little bit, and leaving what you find, you want to be able to place it back and not disturb it too much. You want to be careful about what you do move, if anything. So minimizing campfire impacts, usually not something that's involved in like a typical yoga outdoor class. However, it can be part of like an outdoor retreat or camping experience. And again, I'm following yoga ethics. There's still a lot of, that's still an important piece, of course, respecting wildlife, that we'll talk a little bit about that in a little more detail here in a bit, and then being considerate of others. So a lot of what we'll talk about today has traces of these, leave no trace, throughout all of this. But again, please check out that workshop on the leave no trace and the yamas and the niyamas, because that is going to really dive in deeper to all of these specifically, and the different specific yamas and niyamas that connect to those principles. So, but for now, we just kind of want to have a in our head of what these are, so that way we know we're all on the same page. So we will go ahead and move here on to respecting our surroundings. Again, part of our leave no trace, and just really part of the initial planning. So we're going to kind of walk through all of the steps, at least generally, and I'll give you a couple of different personal anecdotes in classes that I've taught, or things that I've done, and that I've seen other people do. And again, kind of walking through some of these principles, so you can start to connect to them and see, if you haven't done an outdoor yoga class, there's a lot that goes into it. And of course, you can do it intuitively. You can do these things, but sometimes having a little bit of practice and some intentionality and some structure can be really useful too. So as far as respecting surroundings, we want to look at the terrain, the plants, the wildlife, and the insects around. Why do we want to do that? Most of it comes back to safety. Safety is the first thing that we want to start with. Now we're doing outdoors and yoga. It can be very exciting. And some people tend to want to, kind of experience everything. And depending on your class, if you've got kids, people with different mobility, like there's just so much to kind of consider as you're building this class, or when you have a location or you have a class, you need to ways you can kind of plug things in. So the terrain, we will talk about this a little bit more when we talk about in a little bit more. But so for the terrain, a lot of things, again, safety components that we want to think about is if we've got uneven ground at the location that you are. Now, usually if you're doing something like a park or a farm, or something like that, really uneven ground is not necessarily going to be an issue. However, I've taught yoga at a waterfall, and that's always super fun, but there's definitely uneven ground. So like getting to the waterfall required a little bit of, assistance and some help, and consideration and care in planning when and how we went over to the waterfall section. As an example, uneven ground, also, if you're used to balancing, your foot's normally like this, but now you're balancing and your foot's in this weird, like catty corner position, then that's when you're going to see a little bit more challenges. And while that can be very positive and is creating new pathways and doing all of that, it can also be dangerous for someone who might not be as familiar with being able to adjust and adapt when their body's put in a different position. So roots also can be a part of that. Rocks, small rocks are usually the ones that tend to get in the way. Big rocks are usually kind of more fun, and people tend to want to do yoga on them. But really with the terrain, you want to be aware. Something you can do if you have uneven ground is just really even leaning into some of this mindfulness, and being able to really slow things down, step intentionally, use stability. Obviously, just because it's uneven doesn't necessarily mean that it has roots, or it has that, doesn't mean it isn't going to be useful for us. It's just that we just want to have a little more care and consideration. Obviously, if there is an extreme danger and you wouldn't go on it, or you wouldn't let one of your friends or someone in your family that could potentially like represent someone that would be in your class, then you probably want to choose a different location. So with plants, things, again, from a safety perspective, right? If there's poison oak around, if there's poison ivy, poison sumac, all of that. And I don't have any pictures listed here, but cactus as well. And I know some people are from Texas and some people aren't going to be. And I know that there are some cacti in some of the places in even around the DFW area. And so really just being aware of anything that can cause like a reaction with someone, or a safety concern like cacti, for example. If you get too close, you just want to be aware when you're creating the class and planning what you're doing, that like you're, not doing warriors all the way over to the cactus, right? Or, you just want to make sure that you're aware and that you can communicate that to your students as well. Wildlife, you want to maintain a respectable distance. Usually a leave no trace principle is the thumb. So as long as, you can see it from away and the thumb covers it, then you should be good. That's not always possible. And sometimes, you've got a squirrel, or, again, thinking about like more of a park situation with the yoga, or, even like, I used to do Oak Cliff a lot in Dallas, and the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve, and there would, sometimes be birds or things like that, or squirrels. And so it's just being kind. You're in their territory, right? And so just let them do their thing. Don't mess with them. The scope of this particular workshop does not include wildlife or animals that you are doing yoga with, and that's on purpose, because that's beyond the scope of this, and not typically recommended, if we're looking at our leave no trace principle. Not that it's not doable. Again, you just want to be ethical about it. Insects, that can definitely be a thing, right? Like mosquitoes, depending on the area. So something to keep in mind. A lot of times, again, in part of that plan and prepare, making sure that you have, appropriate types of bug spray that aren't damaging to the environment. Again, in a leave no trace correspondence, so you can kind of find your favorite natural repellents, and a lot of them are really good. So just make sure you kind of do some research, or find people who make them that you really trust that work with that. Let's see. And also, depending on where you are, I think I mentioned I'm in Virginia now, and ticks are often a big thing. And I have actually had a tick on me after a yoga class one time. So check for ticks, depending on where you are and if they're in your area, because you want to make sure that everyone, again, is, from a safety perspective, everyone's doing well. All right, so that's some things to consider. And then we want to also think about the elements. So when we're talking about outside, we do not have a controlled environment, right? Certainly outside of our circle of control. So what you want to do, check for the weather. I know you're going to say, oh, well, duh. And weather can certainly be one of the biggest things. One of the things is that also you typically want to try to have like a backup location, if possible, right? Depending on the type of experience you're providing, it may not be possible. So you may need to reschedule, but that's something you just kind of have to look at in context. But you'll want to check the weather. Whenever you've got sun, some reminders you might want to give your participants, or just things you might want to think about is maybe having sunscreen on hand. Let your participants know to bring their sunglasses, their own sunscreen, a hat. Maybe think about shade and the time of day with which you're doing this class. Mornings and evenings tend to be faves. During the middle of the day, less so. But as we'll talk about some different things you can consider later, of course, you can always change for time and things like that, and adapt, because part of yoga is being flexible, right? With wind, you want to just be aware of any balance challenges depending on how windy it is. Secure your mat, your props, if you are even using a mat. I will say typically, if I was teaching like a yoga hike with Explore More, I wouldn't even have people bring their mats. But I have done some classes where I do have people bring their mats. So it just kind of depends, again, on the experience, the location, and what winds up working for you. So we've got that. Then we've got rain. So check the forecast, like we said, have a backup plan. And sometimes if it's just like a little drizzle, or it's something, a little bit of that can sometimes be a really great experience as well, as long as your participants are open to it. Usually something to offer them for that. Depending on how much rain it is as well. Obviously, if you're a yoga instructor, you're likely an adult, and I trust that you can do that. And then we've got the heat. So that one, especially in Texas, is such a big one. You know, and you want to stay hydrated, practice in cooler parts of the day, like we were just talking about, and even modifying. So if you had this big O fitness for hikers plan, right? And you're doing all this single leg stuff and balancing and doing all this wild stuff. And it's, you know, 100 degrees outside. I mean, yes, it's hot yoga, but you know, is that really what your participants need to bring balance to them, right? So in that case, to balance, which is what yoga is there to help us do, you might want to slow it down, or make it not quite as movement filled, or holding, you know, major muscle groups like a chair or anything like that for too long. You don't want to necessarily build up too much heat. You really want to kind of release some excess energy and with that. So again, not that none of these things are not doable. You just, a little preparation goes a long way. So here we're coming to that modifications for uneven surfaces that we mentioned earlier. And so modify those poses for stability in the ground. You know, even think about the little intricate muscles in your ankles. Make sure you do some nice warm-ups, which a lot of joint rotation and things like that are great warm-ups for outdoor workshops, because again, you wind up being in so many different positions. The outdoors, just depending on where you are, can offer a lot of interesting opportunities for movement that you maybe necessarily wouldn't get those same movements in other contexts. You can have blocks, you can have blankets, again, depending on what you're doing, but you can really use trees, rocks, walking sticks. We'll talk about that more. But when you have uneven surfaces, if you have some of those other props to help, again, kind of counter and balance, then I mean, then you've got the makings of a different experience, right? And the uneven surface is what's kind of creating that opportunity. So as you're doing that, of course, you want to encourage people to listen to their bodies. That's part, again, of yoga, mindfulness, part of the experience, connecting to nature, connecting to yourself internally and externally. So being aware of their limits, taking poses that feel right. They can skip, they can take breaks depending on where you are, and pay attention to them, of course, and offer modifications when you've got that as possible. Or if you notice everyone's kind of struggling, you know, with your flow, just scale it back a little bit, right? We want it to be a fun experience. A lot of times people don't want to go outdoors because, again, they don't want to be uncomfortable. And usually if someone's signing up for something like a yoga hike or things like that, they are wanting to do that, but just be mindful that you know, you do want to challenge people and give them something kind of new and an accomplishment. And you also want to keep their safety and some kind of dependability and reliability for yourself, for them as well. So, and a lot of times, like that self-awareness and that mindfulness, like people do need permission to drop in. I've actually had several students tell me after classes that like they just needed my permission to be able to relax. And I know, granted, I know that's not my permission or your permission, but just someone giving them permission to relax, right? Like we are so go, go, go. And when you're going outdoors, you're doing that to slow down and reconnect. So we don't necessarily want to create a pushing experience. Now, again, there are times for that and there are spaces for that. But again, generally, that's kind of our focus for today. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the different types of modifications. We just talked about uneven surfaces. And again, I know we're talking about all of this before we get to the actual sequencing. This is so important and a part of the sequencing, especially with outdoor yoga. So again, because you want to keep in mind the surface, if there's benches, if there's trees available, again, scoping out any other safety concerns. Trees are really great because they're there for support. You can put your hand on the trunk for balance. It can be as easy as that. You can put your back on the tree. I've certainly had people just also sit on the tree. You know, if anything there, you could use the tree. If you could use a wall you can likely use a tree. Again, if it's something that you're either facing the wall or facing away from the wall, a lot of the times a tree is going to give you a very similar experience just outdoors. And so talking about that, even backbends and inversions, if you've seen like people who are working on backbends or inversions, that doesn't mean that you can't do that in an outdoor yoga class, right? Like you can, again, finding an appropriate tree, assessing for any safety concerns, but then, kind of walking it down just like you would a wall, like if you're going to do, a wheel, and, being able to kind of work that back bend down and stretch open and have that prop there as an availability. That's just a suggestion. That doesn't mean that you have to incorporate that into your classes, just an opportunity. That's why with backbends and inversions, even, propping up against the tree for an inversion. As we mentioned earlier, like if you would use a wall looking at it or facing away, tree is going to be a great place. As you can see in this picture here too, like my knee is kind of resting there, which also helped just give me like a little bit of here's where my knee needed to go. So sometimes it can just be really good for awareness and alignment purposes as well. Excuse me. And it also creates this mindful connection. I mentioned the secret therapy of trees earlier. And again, that is in the resources that'll be at the end of this presentation as well. But with that, there's so much that has to do with just like the connection that we have with plants and with the earth, that oftentimes with the way our world works and the way we are, I mean, even right now we're on a computer, right, which is beautiful, and we just want to remember to balance that out with actual outdoor nature time too. A couple other things as far as trees, you can use that for stability really. And like we said, you could do a wheel, you could even do like a wild thing, and use the tree in almost like a supported, right? So maybe you're not all the way down on the ground, but that could really help if someone's trying to work on their wild thing. You can kind of use the tree as, I know there's a fake tree right here behind me in my head, but you can grab that, open up the chest, your feet are on the ground, opening up. I mean, it's just a way to kind of help facilitate some of that movement. And you can also just meditate with a tree, like just sit by it, right? Close your eyes, feel the energy. Yeah, there's just a lot of beauty in that. So trees can be really great. And when we talk about walking sticks in a little bit, a good walking stick that is like from the area you are is just wonderful. So that's a little bit about trees. Next, we're going to talk about rocks. So rocks, again, you can use those in similar ways depending on the size of the rock. You can also use it as a wall. Boulders, again, just big literal walls. If you saw one of the promos for this class or for this workshop, there was this picture of me in some slot canyons in Lower Virginia, actually, channels. And I'm literally just like propped up and hanging out, but just stretching and opening. I mean, there's just so much space, but I was suspended by my legs, but I was able to let my torso relax. So anyway, it's just very interesting ways that you can use nature and your body. Like it's not just hiking, right? And it's not just this yoga class necessarily. It's being able to integrate it. All right, let me walk that back. I'll make another note on that in a second. But there's a lot of different things you can do. So I wanted to give you some suggestions on that. Again, outdoor sequencing, I want to give you some examples of things you can plug into your classes. So stepping stone sequence. So let's say you've got, different rocks that are stepping stones or could be. Even if they weren't intended that way, you can have them that way. A little floor is a lot of action, right? But being able to also do that one-legged balance, which is great for hiking and things like that anyway. But if you can, go from one rock to the other and keep that as part of the practice, maybe you go from one rock, you do a tree, and then you come over to the other, if again, the terrain is available for that. Using a rock as a drishti. So that can be, a one that's far away, that can be one on the ground. There's a lot of ways you can use that one, far off that you can tell. You can use a meditation with the rock, just like you can with a tree, right? You can have it, you can hold it, you can be near it, you can be touching it. And again, just feeling its exchange, breathing, seeing what energy you can feel from it. Again, like the electromagnetic fields. I think that's what the fields was the word I was trying to say earlier that I kept missing. Sorry. Balance challenges, like we talked about with the rocks, being grounded in seated poses. So that's something where you can use the rocks maybe as you can use the rocks as like grounding. It can literally be grounding. Maybe you put one in your lap. You've got a lot of different options there. So in the stepping stone sequence, you can also kind of, again, create that as a little bit of a flow, but it can also be a balance challenge. It can be, you can kind of add all that in. Let's see. Or the rock's texture can be really useful, and depending on like if your shoes are off or if you're touching the rock, like just bringing that extra piece of awareness and that touch sense is really useful. Let's see. And then just from a creative standpoint, again, you can also use them as reaching towards certain rocks or rocks that are like lifting you up, right? As a little Avatar, The Last Airbender note in there. But being able to use that, maybe you use a rock as like a weight, right? If you've ever seen people like holding out their warrior three, right? And they could maybe have a rock, not obviously within reason, but that could be something that you incorporate as well. And then, and so obviously whenever you're doing that, being able to put it back whenever you're done using it, making sure you're not disrupting anything if you do move rocks to be able to use. Walking sticks. Oh, this is my favorite. And you'll have a resource at the end on the slides and as part of the course that talks about walking stick yoga, and it's so much fun. But walking stick yoga, I actually learned about it at a conference last year. And as you can see here, there's it's kind of like the hiking, trekking poles, right? You can also just use like sticks from trees, depending on how tall they are and, if they suit your purposes. I mentioned the waterfall class earlier. I've done it there. They have so many trees and they would do work, and they just have like a little pile of Jessie sticks there. Because what we'll do is actually come in and grab walking sticks. So sometimes, obviously, like in this picture here, you see that one person would have two sticks. But sometimes you can also, if you're using these bigger, taller, like walking stick types, more natural, you can actually just, everybody has one, and even do a circle. You can kind of do some mindful walking in and out, and some of their balance and that challenge comes from each other and also the stick. And doing it's just really fun to see everybody in the middle trying to do like a triangle pose, but everybody's holding on to the different sticks and at different spots, and it can just be a really fun experience. So what does walking sticks help with this? So stability and alignment. I think one of the first things I noticed when using walking sticks was like just the fact that I could tell where my arms needed to be, right? And it helped open this up when I, did more of like the warrior two or T arms, depending on how you look at it. And so it was just really useful. And again, brings a little bit of an awareness and can help with that alignment. And it just helps shift it a little bit. So again, a really great prop to have. I've even done some yoga on the top of a mountain and used my hiking sticks to kind of help support me within that as well. One of the standing sun salutations that we'll talk about in a little bit, and there's a resource for a link to be able to see that as well. And it's not using your shoulders at all, and so that can be really useful to use with walking sticks and help have some different chest openers and things like that. So speaking of different deeper stretches, you can move into different shoulder stretches, different things, like you can do a puppy pose with walking sticks that's modified, or a modified down dog, however you want to look at that and use that. and no one has to put their hands on the ground, right? So you've got some different ways you can use poses that people are familiar with and be able to modify them for this environment. And it's just kind of fun. Hamstring stretches, partner stretches, like I mentioned, you can kind of have it together. And even if you both have walking sticks, there's several different options. I won't go into all of that, but you can, again, there's more resources on that, and just grab some sticks and kind of play around and see what that experience is for you. And, maybe even, you go into a lunge and then come up and bring the foot forward and balance, right? And hold that right foot up and, in front of you type of thing to work those the hip flexors, because it is the hamstrings too. But yeah, and just play around with walking sticks and see what that does. And sometimes if you're again leading something like a yoga and a hike together, using walking sticks can be really useful, because people might already have them. And like I said, you can also use natural ones. You just might have to prepare and plan a little bit. Let's see. And there's a book and a whole resource, and a lot of things on YouTube about walking stick yoga if you're looking for ideas on that. All right, so finally, we get into, okay, what does sequencing look like? Well, again, if you're a yoga teacher, you've been doing yoga, there's the general kind of curve, right? We've got our warm up, our peak poses, and then we've got our kind of our recovery, our resolution. And then all of these little things like mindfulness, intentionality, the location, the intention, where we go, the different poses, all of that is what we then put on our little curve, right? So as long as we know where we're going, we plug in what is relevant. So what are some really good warm-up movements? We've got dynamic stretches where you're, again, kind of moving, bringing those smaller muscles and keeping those nice and lubricated, moving. A lot of times when we're talking about fascia and we're talking about hiking or moving, hiking can sometimes be a very repetitive movement. So depending on the length of your hike and like your physical body that day, things like that, dynamic stretches can really just be a way to kind of wake everything up and keep things moving, where a more isolated movement just wouldn't give you as much range of motion and range in the muscles that it's activating and warming up as well. Joint rotations, I think I mentioned that earlier, especially in the ankles and the knees and the hips. So, whether that's you're doing circles for all of them, and maybe they're doing ankle circles and they're holding a tree, right? Or whatever that looks like. That is really useful. The standing sun-sal modification. So I will go ahead and do that here. I hope that you'll be able to see me, but the way that it is you kind of stretch up as you inhale, exhale, forward fold, inhale into a halfway lift, exhale, forward fold, inhale, up into downward dog, exhale, into chair, exhale, forward fold, inhale, another halfway lift. Maybe you do something different with the arms, and exhale, fold. Again, I've got a link with some different ideas on different like a little warrior flow, but also that standing sun salutation. This is the one that I like to use whenever I'm working with people who have challenging, inside, whenever we're having challenging issues with the shoulders, or maybe going up and down is not useful and is not, again, giving the aim that they came to class for yoga for. But this is also great for outdoors because, again, it doesn't require any putting of your hands down on the ground or touching anything unless you want to. And you can also use this with walking sticks. You can add rocks, you can add trees, you can add anything that you need to as a prop for this. So let me just move this really quick. Gonna see if you can. All right, wonderful. All right. So from here, we're going to inhale, exhale, hold. Inhale, halfway lift. and hold. Sitting back into that chair, which literally my chair is right behind me. And hold. Inhale. Again, maybe you do something different. The arms, or if you've got the sticks. Exhale, hold. And inhale, coming all the way back. You can place your hands on your thighs to come up, or working with any of that. So again, that sun salutation, you can kind of take that, modify it, add anything that feels good, add twists, things like that. You can really take that, but that base structure, it's kind of just, again, always coming into a forward fold, and you're either hinging forward, hinging back, and really opening up a lot of those hinges. So with the hips and the shoulders and the knees and the ankles. So really it's a nice warm up for all of that as well. So you can also do, hip circles, things like that. As far as hiking, I did want to discuss this a little bit. So again, depending on if you're including hiking into this or not, with your yoga, you want to think about, okay, if you're hiking before you do your yoga, as you're thinking about your sequencing, just consider what might be useful there. Usually I would do yoga before the hike. If I was teaching a yoga and hike, and a lot of that is because sometimes people are running a little late. And so sometimes doing the yoga at the beginning just gave the opportunity for people to come in as they needed to. And thinking about that now, so obviously you can do the yoga before, get warmed up for the hike. Wonderful. You could even do a small little, recovery at the end as well, just to kind of to stretch out during, depending on the location of your hike and what you're looking at there. You can do your yoga throughout your hike and just continue to take different stops, again, depending on your intention, the flow of your class. Again, kind of thinking about that curve of, warm up, peak poses, and then cool down. You want to think about that for your entire experience. So just being able to incorporate that, throughout, because depending on some locations, you might have opportunity to do more yoga, in different sections. Also, you can do yoga on the trail by doing different warrior flows that continue to move you forward. Warrior's not the only thing. It's just one of the, usually one of the, I guess, go-tos. There we go. And then again, you can also do yoga afterwards. So just depending on the experience you're trying to provide for people and that they're looking for potentially, can be really useful. Let's see. One thing I do want to mention is that just as far as like closing out the class, obviously a traditional shavasana may or may not be appropriate depending on the class that you're doing. So you would just want to think about, again, maybe some type of, maybe you're sitting and, again, maybe using the rock in your lap as a grounding tool, or, ending sitting, maybe you're ending in Tadasana or standing. Maybe you're walking with a little mindful movement and ending that way. You can get creative. It doesn't have to follow this, like, while there's this curve, it doesn't have to follow any specific types of poses or anything like that. All right. So again, let nature be the guide. Not just you, right? Nature knows what it's doing. So you might want to just think about encouraging creative exploration. Again, encourage the present moment, like we talked about at the beginning of class. Use nature in your cueing. Do things like reaching for a tree or swaying like grass in the wind. A lot of times when I do like dancing tree, we have our arms up, boom, we do a little sway, right? And sometimes we're doing it with the trees. And, if you do that and you want a little balance challenge, you can look up right at the sky. And cloud watching is actually a really great way to end instead of like a traditional shavasana, just like being able to lay on a rock or something like that and be able to look up at the clouds can be a beautiful way to end a class. But yeah, thinking about nature as your and incorporating nature as your cueing. So, using things that are happening in the moment again brings your students into the present moment. High lunge with the arms towards the sky, warrior two, your arms are branches, tree pose, your torso is tall like a tree trunk, right? Just all these different things that can help, bring your connection to nature, which is part of the purpose of this, but also bring just that awareness and intention and things that they can then, they remember, oh, I remember feeling this. So I have this strength and stability, when she told me that pose, that cue. So then when they encounter that again in the natural world, which they will, we can call that generalization, right? So they start to then incorporate that and integrate yoga into their daily lives. So some more examples. We talked about incorporating natural obstacles, natural objects, but obstacles can be fun too, right? Like a little bit of rock climbing where you've got to do a little pigeon on the wall, right? So to speak, if you've got to scramble there, or maybe there's a tree down that you've got to, really lift that hip up and move it over, right? And so be creating some intentionality in using some of those opportunities to create that experience with yoga. Nature imagery and practice, like we just said, you can do that with visualizations, meditations as well. Visualize drawing energy up from the earth. You can also think about like the layers of the earth. Literally, like it says here, there's a world full of examples. So, tree logs, rock formations, maybe thinking about roots growing into the ground with your feet, grounding. So that's another thing we have. Explore has another great workshop that Haley Cotty did, who is the founder of Explore More, and she did a great workshop on grounding. That could be useful as well. So you can incorporate some more strategies from that specifically. Again, that's more of that scope, not necessarily the scope of this presentation. And so that's kind of where we're going there. So you really just want to try to take yoga out of the studio, because people are coming to these classes because or to your offering or your experience because they're looking for something different. So you really want to take it back to that connection between nature and humans and let people experience that. They don't get that on a daily basis usually if they live a typical life that we all do. So yeah, really just working on balance, and nature is such a beautiful way to give us that. And so why not let it hold us and be our support as we're using yoga. So let's see. A couple of other things that I'd love for you to consider is, again, this is forest flow. So this was more so thinking about like a trail, kind of a more foresty vibe. And obviously that's listed here, but the beach could be an option. If you're like me, you've probably seen 1,000,001 yoga teachers doing beach yoga online. Or pictures of it. It looks super cool. Well, I've done yoga on a beach. I've never taught a class on a beach. But there's different considerations with that. Like the soft sand could be a balancing, challenge. And so as you're creating that, you just want to again think about the terrain. In the mountains, that is something I'm familiar with here in Virginia, and altitude and varying temperatures can also require some pre-planning and different considerations to think about. And ultimately, again, like we said earlier with yoga, we're trying to be flexible. It is a practice of being flexible mentally, spiritually, and physically. And so we want to be able to adapt just like nature does. So, for example, maybe it's hotter than expected. Great. Then you'll want to take some time and kind of reduce that down. And maybe reduce the time that you're doing your yoga class, right? Or again, change the types of poses that you're doing, for example. If you have limited space, again, maybe modify the transitions that you were working on. Again, use the natural ground around you or any, surrounding space as well. Yeah. So I think that's probably it from my suggestions on that. And again, just thinking about things, if you know the different types of poses like standing, kneeling, sitting, or prone, just taking a consideration of like, what is that? Again, typically if I was going to teach a hiking class, or a hike as well with the yoga, I'm probably not going to have people bring their mats because then they got to go to the car and do all that. And that's just my personal preference. However, if we're doing yoga, I'll use the waterfall, for example. We've got a couple of areas that we do. Now, maybe there's a section where they do bring their mats over, but there will be areas where we don't have our mats as well. So that's where the kind of the planning is. How windy is it, right? And that's where some of that context starts to come in. So one thing I'd also like to leave you with is a meditation that you can use either literally when you're teaching a yoga hike, or maybe that you just use as a visualization in a different class as well. It's a little bit of like a progressive muscle relaxation and kind of hiking outdoor visualization. But I'll get to that in a moment. So you can have that to kind of finish out our time together. But I did want to let you know that you can earn 3 Yoga Alliance CEUs by having watched this and then creating a practice, creating and practicing an outdoor class, and send your notes and reflection on the practice and how it went. So you can email it to jessiecyoga@gmail.com, or you can send it to the Explore More email, which is also on there, or to both of us. Please send it to Jessie C Yoga for sure. And then that way we can make sure you get taken care of. And whenever you'd like, we do have some resources, again, some sheets that you can use as like a checklist. Some of it's a little long. Again, there might be a shortened version, but there's also a sheet where you can kind of put together your notes for an outdoor class, and then you have it all right there. That could be something that you could very easily do, fill out, and that can be what you turn in. And there's a little space for some reflection at the end as well. So you can use that, or you can use your own paper or type or whatever works best for you. But the prompts are there for you as a guide to complete that activity. I do want to also let you know about some of these different resources. So whenever we were talking about the intentions, there was the blog that I got some of that information from about 4.2 from the Yoga Sutras, and also 2.18. So I did just want to let you know where that information was. While there's so much information on the Yoga Sutras, I really found a lot of value recently in kind of reading other people's interpretations. Then again, the secret therapy of trees, I mentioned that multiple times. So that's there. The standing sun salutation and kind of an outdoor flow sample is on my YouTube. And so there's a link there. Again, it's just some ideas. And you can kind of go from there and build off of it if you haven't done that before. Then for walking stick yoga, I did want to let you guys know about Instill Mindfulness. And that's the person who kind of created, there's a book on walking stick yoga. And right now her name is just losing me right now, but she's the one I did where I first learned about it from. I got to take a workshop with her. And she has a book. Instill Mindfulness is her 501(c) organization where they really help like the community, and they do a lot of work with kids on mindfulness. And walking stick yoga is one of the ways that they've been doing that, and it's in Southwest Virginia. So really great mission, really great work, and it certainly did something for me. So I'm glad I get to share that with you as well. Then we've also got a link for the Explore More bookshop for other books. The Secret Therapy of Trees might be on there, but like Yoga for Hikers is on there. So things that can give you some ideas on some different practices and things that you can use when you're with your outdoor sequencing. And thank you so much for being here. I want you to learn if you want to do the full Yoga in Nature certification, if you haven't already. The Leave No Trace workshop that I was talking about earlier is also a part of that. But you can sign up today and get $100 off right there at that link. So let me stop the share there. And I'm gonna pause this for just a second while I get my meditation script, and then we'll do that for a moment. All right, thanks. All right. So go ahead and find a comfortable seated position. You can also be lying down. That feels better for you. We'll move into this meditation. So just make some space. Feel free to pause this. You want to be comfortable. Once you're ready, gently close your eyes or simply soften your gaze. Take a few deep breaths through your nose, filling your belly with fresh forest air, and then slowly exhaling through your mouth, letting go of any tension. Start by bringing awareness to your body. Curl your toes tightly, like you're gripping the earth beneath your tent. Fold, and then release, letting your feet sink into the soft ground. Tighten your calf muscles next, like you're hiking up a steep trail. Fold, and then release, feeling the tension melt away. And then clench your hands into fists as if you're holding some walking sticks. Squeeze and hold. And then let go, letting your fingers unfurl and relax. Next, squeeze your shoulder blades together like you're carrying a heavy backpack. You're kind of trying to straighten up and hold. And then release, letting your shoulders drop and your back soften. Furrow your brow next. Tighten your jaw and scrunch up your face like you're battling the elements, the sun or the wind. And then hold and release. Letting your forehead smooth, your jaw unclench, and your face relax. Next, imagine yourself in a peaceful clearing deep in the woods. Your tent is pitched nearby, and a warm fire crackles invitingly. The scent of pine fills the air. In the distance, you hear the soothing sound of rushing water. You follow the sound and come upon a majestic waterfall cascading down moss-covered rocks. Watch the water plunge into the pool below, its power both invigorating and calming. Step closer to the waterfall. Feel the cool mist on your face, the roar of the water filling your ears. It's as if the waterfall is washing away your worries, your stress, and any lingering tension. Imagine dipping your toes in the pool at the base of the waterfall. The water is cool and refreshing, revitalizing you. With each breath, feel yourself becoming more grounded, more connected to the earth and to yourself. Remember that you are not your thoughts or feelings. They are like leaves that fall and are carried away by the stream. You are the solid earth, the sturdy trees, and the enduring rock. Take a few more moments to soak in this feeling of peace, renewal, and self-discovery. When you're ready, gently bring your attention back to your breath. Slowly open your eyes or bring your gaze back into focus. Take a moment to stretch and carry this sense of calm, this peace of nature. Keep it with you for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Again, let us know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing and hearing how your outdoor classes go.